Smoke filled the streets like thick fog. David Reed ran through the ruins, his medical pack bouncing against his back with every step. Behind him, explosions lit up the sky in shades of orange and red. The colony world of Vespera 7 was dying, and he had maybe 20 minutes to get the last civilians out. "Medic, over here." Sergeant Anya Volkov's voice crackled through his helmet speaker. David changed direction, ducking under a collapsed beam. His boots crunched over broken glass and debris. 3 months ago, this street had cafes and shops. Now it was a war zone that he found Anya at the entrance to an underground shelter. Her armor was scorched black on one side. Private Leo Santos knelt beside her, prying at a metal door that had been bent by the blast. "Civilians inside," Anya said quickly. "Most evacuated already, but sensors show life signs in the back section." David nodded and squeezed through the gap Leo had created. Inside, emergency lights flickered. The air smelled like burnt plastic and fear. He moved deeper into the shelter, following the sound of clicking voices. Kalari, the insectoid species that had settled this world before the war came. He found them in a corner where the ceiling had partially collapsed. 2 adults covered in chitinous plates, their compound eyes reflecting his flashlight beam. Between them, wrapped in thermal blankets, was something small. Very small. "We help you," David said slowly, setting down his pack. His translator chip handled the rest. The female, Nara, clicked rapidly. Her words came through garbled. "Injured," David realized. He scanned her with his medical device. Broken plates, internal bleeding. The male, Tikrel, was worse. His left side was crushed under rubble. "Lao! Oh no! Need help here!" David shouted. His teammates appeared. Together, they worked to free Tikrel while David stabilized both parents. Time was running out. Enemy forces were closing in. They could hear the bombing getting closer. "We have to move now," Anya said, checking her tactical display. "Transport leaves in 4 minutes." David lifted Nara carefully while Leo and Anya supported Tikrel between them. That was when David saw the bundle Nara had been protecting. A baby. A Kalari infant, no bigger than a human newborn. Its tiny compound eyes stared up at him. It made soft clicking sounds. "I carry baby," David said to Nara. She clicked weakly, agreement mixed with fear. David tucked the infant against his chest, one arm supporting it securely. The baby's name was Pip. Nara managed to tell him through the translator. They ran. The shelter exit was 50 meters away. Then 30. Then 10. The world exploded. David felt himself thrown sideways. His ears rang. Dust and smoke everywhere. He tucked into a ball, protecting Pip with his entire body. Debris rained down around them. When the shaking stopped, David looked up. The shelter had collapsed behind them. Anya was pulling Tikrel and Nara through a different exit, the one that led to the main evacuation point. She was shouting something, but David couldn't hear through the ringing in his ears that he stumbled forward, still holding Pip. The baby began to see our Y.IT started as a whimper. Then it grew and grew. The sound wasn't just loud, it was painful. It vibrated through David's skull like a drill. His vision blurred. His teeth ached. Every bone in his body felt like it was resonating with that terrible sound. Pip was screaming now, a biological alarm system designed by evolution to summon adult Kalari and drive away predators. To any species except Kalari, the sound was agony. David reached the transport ship. Anya had gotten the parents aboard the main vessel. She turned to help David, then froze. Her face went pale. She pressed her hands to her ears. "Can't. David, I can't." She shouted over the noise. Leo appeared at the transport door. He took one step down the ramp, then staggered backward. The Soren pilot, Rask, emerged from the cockpit. His reptilian face twisted in pain. He hissed something in his own language. The translator managed to catch it. "Cannot tolerate. Make it stop or leave it. He's just a baby," David shouted back. Another explosion closer this time. The enemy was almost here. David looked at his squad. At the transport. At the tiny alien infant in his arms who was crying like the world was ending. Maybe for Pip, it was that he made his decision in 2 seconds. "Go!" David yelled to Anya. Take the main ship. I'll use the emergency shuttle. Meet you at the rendezvous point. David? No. Anya started forward, but Leo held her back. There was no time to argue. David ran to the small emergency shuttle parked near the transport. It was barely bigger than a cargo pod, meant for 2 people maximum. He climbed in, still holding Pip. The baby's cries filled the tiny space, bouncing off metal walls, amplifying into a sound that made David's nose bleed. He strapped into the pilot's seat one-handed, Pip secured against him with his other arm. His fingers fumbled over controls. He could barely see through the pain-induced tears. The shuttle's engines whined to life. Behind him, the main transport lifted off. Ahead, enemy fighters appeared on the horizon. David pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot into the sky, leaving the burning colony behind. Pip screamed and screamed and screamed that David's head felt like it would split open. Blood ran from his nose, dripped from his ears. But he held the baby close and flew toward the stars, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or maybe, somehow, the most important choice he'd ever make. Blood dripped onto the control panel. David wiped his nose with his sleeve and tried to focus on flying. The emergency shuttle rattled around him, struggling through the atmosphere. Pip continued screaming. Every medical technique David knew, he tried. He checked the baby's temperature, normal for Kalari. He checked for injuries, found none. He adjusted the cabin pressure, the lighting, the temperature. Nothing worked. The screaming actually got worse. David's vision swam. His stomach churned. The pain in his head was so intense he could barely think. This was how the Kalari had survived on their homeworld. He remembered from training. Their babies screamed to call their parents and drive away anything that might hurt them. Evolution had made that scream into a weapon, and it was killing him. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer. Space opened up ahead, black and full of stars. David aimed for the rendezvous coordinates Anya had sent before communications went fuzzy. His hands shook on the controls. Pip wailed, little body rigid with distress. Something in David's chest cracked. Not physically, but emotionally. This wasn't just an alien. This was a baby. A terrified infant who'd just lost everything, whose world had literally exploded around him, who was surrounded by strange sounds and smells, and a creature he didn't know that David's own childhood came back to him. After his father died, when David was 12, his mother had fallen apart for months. David had raised his 3 younger siblings while working part-time jobs. He learned to change diapers, make bottles, calm nightmares. He learned that babies didn't cry to be difficult. They cried because they needed something. What did Pip need? Safety. Comfort. The feeling that someone cared. David unbuckled his harness. The shuttle was on automatic navigation now, heading toward the coordinates. He stood carefully in the small space, Pip still in his arms. "Hey, little guy," David said softly. I know you're scared." He held Pip against his chest, the baby's small body pressed over his heart. Then David started to rock, gentle and rhythmic. Side to side, the way his mother had rocked his baby sister, the way humans had comforted their children for thousands of years. And he hummed that "it" was an old song, something his grandmother used to sing. David didn't remember the words anymore, but the melody was burned into his memory. Soft and low, barely audible over the shuttle's engines. Pip's screaming wavered. David kept rocking, kept humming, his heartbeat steady against the baby's back. The warmth of his body surrounding the small alien. The screams became cries. The cries became whimpers. The whimpers became soft clicking sounds, then silence. David hardly dared to breathe. Pip's compound eyes blinked up at him. The baby made a gentle clicking noise, what David's translator identified as contentment. Tiny limbs curled against David's uniform. "There we go," David whispered. "There we go, buddy." Relief flooded through him so intensely his knees went weak. He sat back down in the pilot's seat, Pip still cradled against his chest. The headache was fading. The nausea was passing. He could think again. What had just happened? David checked the shuttle systems with one hand while supporting Pip with the other. That was when he saw the warning lights. Engine damage from the battle. He was losing fuel pressure. No, David muttered, fingers flying over controls. The shuttle shuddered. One engine died. Then the others started failing. David scanned for the nearest safe landing spot. There, a small moon orbiting a gas giant, uninhabited but with a breathable atmosphere. He aimed for it. The descent was rough. David held Pip tight, protecting the baby's head as the shuttle bounced and skidded across rocky ground. Metal screamed. Something exploded in the engine compartment. Then everything went still. David sat in the darkness, breathing hard. Pip made questioning clicks. "We're okay," David said, checking the baby over carefully. "Not a scratch. We're okay." He assessed the situation. The shuttle was dead, wouldn't fly again without major repairs. The communications array was damaged. He could send out a basic distress signal, but couldn't receive responses. Life support was working, but the heating system was failing. Outside temperature, his sensors showed, would drop to freezing once the sun set, and he had a baby to keep alive. David gathered what supplies he could find. Emergency rations, medical kit, thermal blankets, water recycler. He managed to rig up a basic shelter using the shuttle's hull for protection from wind. Then he tackled the biggest problem: food for Pip. Kalari infants needed a specific nutrient formula. David didn't have that. What he had was his medical knowledge and some basic ingredients in the emergency supplies. He mixed proteins, vitamins, and minerals in ratios he hoped would work. He used the medical synthesizer to adjust the consistency. Pip drank it. Not happily, but he drank it. The sun was setting now, painting the rocky moon in shades of purple and gold. Beautiful and deadly. Temperature was already dropping. David wrapped Pip in every thermal blanket he had. Then he wrapped the bundle against his own chest inside his jacket. His body heat would have to be enough. Night fell fast. The cold came faster. David sat with his back against the shuttle, Pip tucked inside his jacket, and talked. He told stories about Earth, about his family, about why he'd joined the military, to send money home for his siblings' education. He talked about his first combat mission, his fears, his hopes. Pip listened, David thought. The baby's eyes stayed open, watching David's face. The temperature dropped to -20. Minos tiati. David's teeth chattered. He held Pip closer, giving the baby every bit of warmth he had. "Just hold on," David whispered into the frozen darkness. "Help is coming. Just hold on." He hoped he was right. Dawn came slowly to the frozen moon. David hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night holding Pip, talking to keep himself awake, moving just enough to maintain circulation without disturbing the baby. His body ached from the cold and the awkward position, but Pip was warm. Pip was alive. That was what mattered. The baby's coloring had changed overnight, David noticed. Instead of the dark gray-green Pip had been when they first met, the infant's chitinous plates now showed hints of blue. David's broken translator managed to identify it as a color associated with feeling safe. "Good morning, buddy," David said, his voice rough from talking all night. "We made it." Pip clicked softly and nestled closer. The sun rising over the horizon brought warmth, but also concern. David checked his distress beacon. Still transmitting. Still no response. He rationed out another feeding for Pip, using the last of his emergency protein powder to make the formula. After today, he'd have to get creative. Hours passed. David explored the immediate area, always keeping Pip close. The moon was barren, nothing but rocks and dust. No water source. No boyetashchen. No rescue. Then, mid-afternoon, David heard it. The sound of engines that he scrambled to the highest point near the shuttle, waving his arms. A ship descended, but it wasn't a coalition military vessel. It was civilian, marked with Kalari symbols. The ship landed 50 meters away. A door opened. 3 Kalari emerged, moving cautiously. The leader was elderly, her plates weathered and marked with age. She approached slowly, her compound eyes fixed on David. More specifically, on the infant David held against his chest. The translator came online with a burst of static. "You have our child," the elderly Kalari said. Her voice was tight, with barely controlled emotion. "I'm protecting him," David said quickly, holding up one hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. His parents were injured in the evacuation. "I promised to reunite them." "I'm Corporal David Reed, Coalition Médicale Corps." I am Trilma, the elderly Kalari said. We are searching for survivors from the Vesper colony. How did you come to possess this infant? David explained everything. The evacuation, the separation, Pip's crying, the crash landing. As he spoke, the other Kalari moved closer, their body language radiating tension. Our young are precious, Trilma said. Their cries are designed to summon us and repel all others. How are you still standing? I found a way to calm him, David said simply. Impossible. No other species has ever endured the distress call of our infants, much less soothed one. I can show you, David offered. Trilma clicked something to her companions. They tensed, ready to intervene. David understood. If he was wrong, if Pip started screaming, they'd take the baby by force. He'd do the same in their position. David adjusted his hold on Pip, positioning the baby against his chest where Pip could feel his heartbeat. He started to rock gently, humming that same old melody. Pip's eyes closed. The baby made contented clicking sounds and curled tighter against David. The three Kalari stood frozen in shock. This is not possible, Trilma whispered. In all our history, across all the species we have encountered, none have been able to comfort our young. The sound is too painful. The instinct to flee is too strong. Humans are stubborn, David said with a slight smile. And I've had practice with babies. Trilma stepped closer, studying David with those compound eyes. You said this child's parents were evacuated. Do you know their names? Tikrel and Nara. One of the other Kalari made a sharp, clicking sound. They are aboard our vessel. They believe their son was lost. They have been in deep mourning. Can I see them? David asked. Minutes later, David stood in the Kalari ship's common area. Tikrel and Nara rushed toward him, their movements frantic. David carefully, slowly extended Pip toward them. Nara took her son with trembling limbs. She held him close, clicking rapidly in words the translator couldn't keep up with. Tikrel wrapped around both of them, his own clicking mixing with Nara's. Then Pip began to cry. Not the terrible weapon scream from before, but distressed whimpering. The baby's limbs reached back toward David. Nara's color shifted to something the translator marked as confusion and hurt. She tried to comfort her son, but Pip's cries grew louder. David saw the pain in the parents' body language. Their child was rejecting them. May I? David asked gently. Nara reluctantly handed Pip back. The moment David held him, the baby calmed. David's heart broke for the parents. He knew that feeling, watching a child need someone else. Trilma spoke quietly with Tikrel and Nara. Then she turned to David. Our infants sometimes form temporary bonds with secondary caregivers. It is rare but natural. Pip has bonded with you during his time of greatest fear. He associates you with safety. How long does it last? David asked. Days. Weeks. It varies. Trilma paused. This has never happened with another species before. We do not know what it means. A communication panel beeped. One of the Kalari crew answered, then turned. Coalition forces are hailing us. They are searching for their missing soldier. David felt torn. His duty was to return to his unit. But Pip needed him, at least for now. And these people, these parents who'd lost so much, they needed their son back. I have a request, David said to Trilma. Can you take me to the Coalition rendezvous point? I need to report in. But maybe I can help Pip transition back to his parents over the next few days. If that's okay. Trilma's color shifted to something warm. I think that would be acceptable, Corporal Reed. In fact, I believe we have much to discuss about your species and ours. The ship lifted off, carrying David toward an uncertain future and a conversation that would change everything. The conference room aboard Harmony Point Station was too formal for David's comfort. He sat in a chair designed for beings much larger than humans, Pip asleep in a carrier strapped to his chest. Around the curved table sat representatives from half a dozen species, all watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Ambassador Petra Williams, the human representative, gave him an encouraging nod. Beside her sat Counselor Trilma, General Cross of the Soren military, and several others whose names David had already forgotten. Corporal Reed, General Cross began, his reptilian voice rumbling through the translator. You disappeared from your assigned evacuation with a civilian infant. You crashed on an uninhabited moon. You maintained radio silence for 18 hours. Do you understand the severity of these actions? Yes, sir, David said. But the infant would have died if I'd done anything else. The other soldiers couldn't tolerate his crying. I made the choice I thought would save his life. A choice that has created an unusual situation, Ambassador Williams said. Her tone was neutral, but David caught the hint of amusement in her eyes. You become something of a galactic news story, Corporal? David blinked. What? Trilma activated a display screen. News footage appeared, showing David's crash shuttle from multiple angles. Then video from the shuttle's black box, showing him holding Pip through the frozen night, talking to the baby, sharing his warmth. The footage had been edited together with emotional music. The Kalari have been sharing this widely, Trilma explained. The human soldier who saved one of our children. You've received over 2 billion views across coalition networks. David felt his face grow hot. I was just doing my job. No, Trilma said gently. You did something we thought impossible. And in doing so, you may have helped us solve a crisis we have faced for many years. She explained then, and David listened with growing understanding. The Kalari had spread across dozens of worlds since joining the coalition, but their infant mortality rate had climbed steadily. Babies born away from the Kalari homeworld suffered higher rates of distress, illness, failure to thrive. Some rejected their own parents. Some cried until they damaged themselves. Kalari scientists have been studying the problem for decades. They suspected it was related to losing the specific environment of their homeworld, the pheromones and sounds and rhythms that evolution had designed their infants to expect. But they couldn't recreate it artificially. Until you, Trilma said. You found a way to comfort a Kalari infant using only your instincts and human caregiving methods. Your heartbeat, your warmth, your voice. Simple things, but they worked. I don't understand how that helps, David said. General Cross leaned forward. The Kalari have requested that you serve as a consultant to teach other caregivers, including non-Kalari, how to help their infants, to study what makes your methods effective. David looked down at Pip, who was starting to wake. I'm a soldier, not a teacher. You're whatever the coalition needs you to be, Cross said. However, this is not an order. We're asking if you'd be willing. David thought about his squad. Anya and Leo were waiting for him somewhere on this station. They'd been through hell together. He was supposed to return to duty to fight alongside them. But he thought about Pip too. About Tikrel and Nara's pain when their son reached for David instead of them. About other parents on other worlds, watching their babies suffer and not knowing why. How long would this assignment last? David asked. Initially, 1 month, Ambassador Williams said. Your squad has been placed on light duty due to casualties sustained during the evacuation. They're being reassigned to station security here at Harmony Point. You'd still be with them, just in a different capacity. And after the month. That depends on the results, Trilma said. But Corporal Reed, you should know something else. Ours is not the only species struggling with infant care in multi-species environments. Others have been watching this situation with interest. Before David could respond, an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed around the conference room. General Cross stood immediately, his hand going to the communication device on his belt. Report. He barked. A voice came through, tense and quick. Refugee vessel under attack, Sector 7. Raiders. They have civilians aboard, including multiple Kalari families with infants. Medical teams cannot reach the wounded. The infants are in distress, and the screaming is incapacitating rescue efforts. Cross looked at David. Everyone looked at David. Pip chose that moment to wake fully, making soft clicking sounds. David stood, adjusting the carrier by pure instinct. How fast can we get there? David asked. 12 minutes by emergency shuttle, Cross said. Then we should go now. The next 12 minutes passed in a blur. David found himself on a military shuttle with Anya and Leo, who'd been grabbed from their security posts. They'd had no warning, no briefing, just orders to gear up and go. Good to have you back, Anya said, checking her weapon. Even if you're apparently a celebrity now. Shut up, David muttered, but he was grinning. Leo looked at Pip. So we're bringing a baby to a combat situation? We're bringing the one thing that can help those other babies, David corrected. Pip stays on the shuttle unless absolutely necessary. The damaged refugee ship appeared on their view screen, drifting and dark. Smaller raider vessels circled it like predators. Coalition fighters engaged the raiders, driving them back. The shuttle docked with the refugee ship. David, Anya, and Leo moved through the airlock. The screaming hit them like a physical wall. Even through sealed helmets, the sound of multiple Kalari infants crying in terror was overwhelming. David saw Leo stumble. Anya pressed her hands to her helmet. David gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Time to do what humans did best, adapt and help, no matter how impossible it seemed. The medical bay was chaos. Medical staff from 4 different species crowded around beds, trying to help injured refugees, but the crying made it impossible to focus. Some medics had already retreated, overwhelmed by the psychic assault of 7 Kalari infants screaming simultaneously. David stepped through the door and immediately felt the familiar spike of pain behind his eyes. But he'd been through this before. He knew he could endure it. "Anya, Leo, help me get these other humans organized," David said, raising his voice over the noise. 3 human nurses huddled near the door, hands pressed to their ears. David approached them quickly. "Listen to me. I know it hurts, but we can do this. I need you to watch what I do and copy it exactly." He moved to the nearest infant, a tiny thing strapped to a medical bed for safety. Its parents stood nearby, their colors shifting through patterns David's translator marked as anguish and helplessness. "May I?" David asked the parents. They clicked agreement, desperate for anything that might help. David lifted the baby carefully, positioning it against his chest. He started the gentle rocking motion that had worked with Pip. He hummed, low and steady, letting the vibration travel through his chest into the infant's body. The screaming didn't stop immediately, but it changed, became less intense. The other babies, hearing one of their number calm, slightly, also began to quiet. "See," David called to the human nurses. "Your heartbeat is the key. They need to feel it. Rock side to side, not back and forth. Hum, don't sing. Keep it rhythmic." The nurses moved forward hesitantly. David guided them, showing them how to hold the infant securely, how to position them over the heart, how to maintain the rocking rhythm even when their arms got tired. One by one, the babies calmed. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that the medical teams could return and work on the injured refugees. Anya stood guard at the door, while Leo helped organize the human staff. David moved between the nurses, offering guidance, correcting positions, encouraging them when the crying got worse before it got better. After an hour, the medical bay was functioning again. Wounds were being treated. Families were being reunited. The human nurses looked exhausted but proud. David handed the infant he'd been holding back to its grateful parents and slumped against a wall. Pip, who'd been quietly watching from the carrier, made concerned clicking sounds. "I'm okay, buddy," David said softly. "Just tired." Trilma appeared in the doorway, her color pattern bright with excitement. "Corporal Reed, what you just did, what you taught these others to do, this is revolutionary." "It's just baby care," David said. "Humans have been doing this for thousands of years." "Exactly." Trilma moved closer. "Don't you see? Humans evolved as adaptable caregivers. Your species had to survive in countless different environments on your homeworld. You couldn't rely on pure instinct like many species do. You had to watch, learn, adjust your methods to each child's individual needs." David thought about his siblings, how different each one had been, how he'd had to learn what worked for each of them. That adaptability, Trilma continued, it extends to caring for other species. You don't just follow a biological program. You observe, you problem solve, you empathize. These are skills that translate across species barriers. Over the next few days, David became something he'd never expected to be: a teacher. He worked with volunteers from multiple species, showing them the human approach to infant care. Not all of them could do it. Some species biology made it impossible to tolerate the Kalari distress cry, but humans and a few others could learn. Word spread through Harmony Point. Parents from various species started asking questions about human childcare techniques. David found himself consulting on problems he'd never imagined, adapting human methods to alien biology. Through it all, Pip stayed with him. The baby was growing, developing, becoming more active and curious. Tikrel and Nara visited daily, and slowly, carefully, Pip was bonding with them again. David made sure of it, always encouraging Pip to spend time with his parents, always praising the baby when he responded well to them. It was working. Pip's color shifted to warm tones when both David and his parents were present. The bond was becoming less exclusive, more like what Trilma had described, a normal attachment to a secondary caregiver. Then Leo brought David urgent information. The raiders who attacked the refugee ship, Leo said quietly, pulling David aside. We've been tracking them. They're part of a trafficking ring. David felt ice in his stomach. Trafficking what? Kalari infants. They steal them, use the crying as a weapon to incapacitate defenders, then sell the babies to illegal research facilities. That's sick. It gets worse, Anya said, joining them. We found their base location, an asteroid in an uninhabited system. Intelligence suggests they're holding at least 20 infants there, maybe more. David looked down at Pip, sleeping peacefully in his carrier. 20 babies, stolen from their families, suffering. I assume you have a plan? David asked. We do, Anya said. But it's risky. We need to infiltrate the base, disable whatever they're using to amplify the babies' cries, then extract the infants. Command won't approve a mission that puts babies at risk. So we do it unofficially, David said. That's treason, Leo pointed out, but he was smiling. We could be court-martialed, or we could save 20 babies, David said. I know which one I'm choosing. Onyon Noindith. Tikrel and Nara want in. So do several other Kalari whose children were taken. We'll need your skills to calm the infants during extraction. David looked at his friends, these people he'd fought beside for 2 years. Then he looked at Pip, thinking about all the babies like him who were suffering right now. When do we leave? David asked. Tonight, Anya said. We move fast before command catches wind of this. David adjusted Pip's carrier and stood. Time to prove that humans weren't just adaptable caregivers. They were also stubborn protectors who'd do whatever it took to save the innocent. The asteroid base looked abandoned from the outside, just another piece of space rock drifting in the dark. But David's scanner showed life signs inside, dozens of them. Most were small, infant-sized. His team moved through the docking bay in silence. Besides David, Anya, and Leo, there were 6 Kalari volunteers, including Tikrel. They'd left Pip safely aboard the ship with Nara, though it had been hard to separate. The baby had clung to David, seeming to sense something was wrong. 2 guards ahead, Leo whispered, checking his tactical display. Anya and Tikrel moved forward. Seconds later, both guards were down, unconscious but alive. They wanted prisoners, evidence for a trial later. The team advanced deeper into the facility. The corridor opened into a large chamber, and David's heart nearly stopped. Cages. Dozens of metal cages stacked along the walls. In each one, a Kalari infant. And every single baby was screaming. The sound was amplified by devices mounted on the walls, turned into a weapon so powerful that David felt blood start to drip from his nose immediately. The Kalari volunteers collapsed, their biology unable to withstand their own children's weaponized cries. Leo, find those amplifiers and shut them down. Anya shouted over the noise. David, do your thing. Leo ran toward the control panels. David stumbled toward the nearest cage, vision blurring from pain. His hands shook as he worked the lock. Inside, a tiny infant thrashed in terror. David lifted the baby out, pulled it against his chest, and started to rock. He hummed through the blood in his mouth, through the splitting headache, through the nausea. He poured every ounce of calm he could manage into that simple motion. The baby's screams lessened. Just slightly, but enough, the amplifiers around the room flickered. Leo had reached the controls. One by one, the devices shut down. The sonic assault decreased from unbearable to merely awful. David moved to the next cage, then the next. He couldn't hold all the babies at once, but he could calm them one at a time, just enough to break the feedback loop of terror. As each infant quieted, the others calmed slightly too. The Kalari volunteers recovered enough to help. Tikrel reached his son's side, his movements fierce with determination. Together, the team worked through the cages. They were freeing the 12th infant when the raiders arrived. 5 armed figures burst through the far door. Anya returned fire immediately, her shots precise and controlled. Leo provided cover, while David shielded the babies he'd just freed. The firefight was brief but intense. Anya took down 3 raiders. Leo got the 4th. The 5th tried to run, but Tikrel tackled him, his Kalari strength overwhelming the surprised raider. Base is secure, Anya reported, but more might be coming. We need to move fast. They worked frantically. 23 infants total, all freed from their cages. David organized the evacuation like a military operation, which it was. Each Kalari volunteer carried as many babies as they safely could. David took 3 himself, using a makeshift sling he'd fashioned from cargo webbing. 1 infant, though wouldn't calm for anyone. She was smaller than the others, her coloring dull and sickly. She screamed with what little strength she had left. When David scanned her, his medical training kicked in immediately. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, signs of infection. This baby was dying. We have to move, Anya said urgently. More raiders are incoming, 5 minutes out. I need 2 minutes, David said, sitting down right there in the middle of the facility. He positioned the sick infant against his chest, directly over his heart. He hummed the lullaby his grandmother had taught him, the one he'd sung to Pip in the frozen darkness of that moon. The baby's screaming weakened, not from calm, but from exhaustion. She was giving up. Come on, David whispered. Come on, little one. Stay with me. Feel that heartbeat. That means you're safe. That means someone's got you. Don't give up. He rocked gently, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. The baby's color shifted, just barely, from that sickly gray towards something healthier. Her eyes focused on his face, and she stopped crying. Not dead. Calm. Trusting. Got you, David said softly. I've got you. They made it back to the ship with 90 seconds to spare. Coalition forces arrived shortly after, responding to the distress signal Leo had sent. The raiders who'd been inbound tried to flee and were captured. The aftermath was complicated. Technically, David and his team had conducted an unauthorized military operation. But with 23 rescued infants and a major trafficking ring dismantled, Command decided to look the other way. Anya and Leo both received commendations. So did David, though he barely noticed. He was too busy making sure the sick infant, who he'd nicknamed Little Bit, survived the trip back to Harmony Point. 2 weeks later, David stood in a new facility on the station. The sign above the door read, Coalition Center for Interspecies Family Support. Inside, human caregivers worked with families from a dozen species, teaching and learning, sharing the human gift for adaptable nurturing. Pip toddled over on unsteady legs. He was growing fast now, fully bonded with his parents but still visiting David daily. Tikrel and Nara had become close friends, part of an extended family that crossed species lines. Little Bit had survived. She was healthy now, reunited with parents who'd thought they'd never see her again. They visited David often, bringing their daughter to see the human who'd refused to let her die. Ambassador Williams stopped by during one of these visits. You've started something remarkable here, David, she said. 5 more species have requested human consultants for their childcare programs. The council is talking about making this a permanent initiative. David looked around the center. Anya was helping a nervous Soren father learn to hold his newborn. Leo was installing better temperature controls for species that needed specific climates. Everywhere, humans were doing what they did best, adapting, learning, building bridges. What do you think? Williams asked. Want to make this official? Full-time assignment. David felt Pip grab his leg, clicking happily. He thought about all the families he'd helped, all the babies he'd saved. Yeah, David said, smiling. I think I do. Outside the center, ships came and went, carrying news of the human caregivers across Coalition space. And in hospitals and homes on 100 worlds, babies of a dozen species slept peacefully, calmed by the oldest human skill of all, the ability to care for those who needed it most.